program facilitator this morning. Very quickly, before we can start with the media briefing, I would just like to lay a few ground rules for the proceedings. First of all, can we please all switch our cell phones to silent, please? And I've already done that with mine, actually. And then secondly, can we also please wait for the end of the briefing to ask questions? The questions will be taken right at the end. There will be an open question and answer session after the briefing. And then, of course, after the briefing, you will also receive a full media statement in media packs. Right now, what you have in your folder is the program, but immediately after the briefing, you will be given a media statement. And if there are any requests for interviews, could you please just indicate to either myself or my colleague, Mr. Spio Charlie, Spio is over there, so that then we can schedule your interviews accordingly. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my pleasure to give over to the CEO of Umalusi, Dr. Rakometsi, to commence with the media briefing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me pleasure to welcome the chairperson of Umalusi Council, Professor John Volmink, extraordinary professor, Northwest University, Marketing Campus. Here is Professor Volmink next to me. Also welcome Professor Dan Khwadi, Deputy Chairperson, Umalusi Council, member of the Executive Committee of Council, and Vice Chancellor, Northwest University, Professor Khwadi. Professor Prutluk, Chairperson of the Umalusi Assessment Standards Committee, member of the Executive Committee of Council, and Vice Dean of Education at the University of Johannesburg. Good. Professor Mabokang Munnapula Mapesela, member of the Executive Committee of Council, Dean of Academic Development at Central University of Technology in Bloemfontein, Free State. Member of Umalusi Assessment Standards Committee, Mr. Brian Schroeder, Deputy Director General, Western Cape Department of Education, sitting in the audience. Brian, please wait. You're welcome, Brian. Nefaith Ramshali, Senior Manager, Quality Assurance of Assessment at Umalusi. Here is Faith sitting next to me. Senior Management of Umalusi, the staff of Umalusi, representatives of different assessment bodies, editors and reporters, ladies and gentlemen. Umalusi is pleased to hold this media briefing in the aftermath of the 2014 national examinations. Our aim as Umalusi is to make sure that we create an environment that will enable us to continually deliver on our standard setting and quality assurance mandate. To this end, Section 27 of the National Qualifications Framework Act outlines the functions of the Quality Council. Of particular significance to this process is Section 27H, which indicates that the Quality Council, Umalusi in this regard, must develop and implement policy and criteria for assessment for the qualifications on its sub-framework. The General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance Act, acronymed GENFEDQUA Act, the founding act of Umalusi, mandates Umalusi Council to assure the quality of assessments at exit points and to issue certificates to successful candidates. A key function of the Council in this process is the approval of results. Section 17A 5B of the GENFEDQUA Act stipulates that the Council must, with the concurrence of the Director General, and after consultation with the relevant assessment body or education institution, approve the publication of the results of the learners if the council is satisfied that the assessment body or educational institution has, one, conducted the assessment free from any irregularity that may jeopardize the integrity of the assessment or its outcomes. Two, complied with requirements prescribed by the council for conducting assessments. Three, applied the standards prescribed by the council with which a learner is required to comply with in order to obtain a certificate. And four, complied with every other condition determined by the council. The council must issue certificates to learners who have achieved qualifications or part qualifications. From the above, it is clear that Umalusi is required to approve the release of results once it is satisfied that the examinations have been conducted in a fair, valid, and credible manner. The results of the following assessment bodies were subjected to Umalusi standardization processes. The Independent Examinations Board, IEB, National Senior Certificate for the IEB, and the General Education and Training Certificate ABET Level 4 for the IEB. Another assessment body, South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Sakai, which offers the National Senior Certificate. Another assessment body, Benchmark, which offers General Education and Training Certificate, ABET Level 4. Another one, the Department of Basic Education, DBE, which offers the National Senior Certificate. The Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET, which offers the following qualifications: General Education and Training Certificate, ABET Level 4, NATED N1 to N3 programs, National Certificate Vocational NCV. Regarding the National Senior Certificate, matric, the learner enrollments for the different assessment bodies are as follows. Department of Basic Education, 550,127 learners, full-time candidates, and 138,533 part-time candidates. For the Independent Examinations Board, IEB, 976 full-time candidates and 475 part-time candidates. For Sakai, 1,190 learners from independent schools and home schools. On behalf of Umalusi, I'm delighted to report that we have successfully delivered on our mandate, which the Chairperson of Council, Professor John Volming, will elaborate on shortly. As we know, milestones and achievements are in most cases a product of a collective effort. True to this view, today's media briefing is a pinnacle of the hard work done by Umalusi's staff and members of Council in ensuring that Umalusi does, in fact, deliver on its mandate as a Council for Quality Assurance in general and further education and training. Important stakeholders are the learners and the parents, who are eager to know whether Umalusi has carried out the necessary processes that ensure the credibility of their exit level qualifications. I sincerely thank all Umalusi appointed moderators and monitors, as well as Umalusi staff, for putting immense effort in assuring the quality of assessments and examinations. The various units at Umalusi have contributed significantly to the outcomes of these examinations. Staff in these units have displayed commitment, patience, and dedication under conditions fraught with stress and challenges for an extended period. Their unremitting hard work has indeed paid dividends. We thank the members of the Umalusi's Assessment Standards Committee, a committee of council under the leadership of Professor Kurt Luck. The Assessment Standards Committee is made up of independent experts in education, mathematics, and statistics from different research institutes and universities in South Africa. The work of the Assessment Standards Committee is to provide guidance to Umalusi on matters relating to establishing, maintaining, and improving the standards and quality of assessment for all qualifications registered on the General and Further Education and Training Sub-Framework of Qualifications, Umalusi's Sub-Framework of Qualifications. The Assessment Standards Committee carries out the process of standardizing marks of all qualifications Umalusi quality assures. We must accept that there is no system that is flawless. We are, however, satisfied that whatever examination challenges there might have been in this year's examination processes, they were not systemic and were effectively and adequately dealt with by the respective assessment bodies. In order to make this determination, there are various quality assurance measures that must be carried out. These are the moderation and approval of question papers, the verification of the moderation of school-based assessment, SBA, the monitoring of the conduct of examinations, the monitoring of the marking process, the verification of marking, the standardization of the results. With regard to marking, Umalusi conducted the monitoring of marker selection and related processes with a view to improve the practices followed by various provincial departments of education. Umalusi monitored the selection of markers in 8 of the 9 provincial departments of education. Umalusi observed the following processes in the provinces visited. 1, the process of marker selection. 2, the training of various levels of markers. Ladies and gentlemen, in general, the different assessment bodies adhere to the criteria for markers appointment as stated in the Education Labor Relations Council Resolution number 6 of 1997 as amended in 2001, and the additional criteria set by individual provincial departments of education. Also, there was notable improvement in the manner in which the memorandum discussion meetings were conducted. Of note is the introduction of the tolerance range by the Department of Basic Education. The most outstanding characteristic of the 2014 marking session was the improved training of markers, which had a positive impact on the quality of marking in general. Whilst huge strides have been made in the strengthening of the marking processes, there is still room for further improvements. This year saw the introduction of a new independent assessment body, the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, SACAI, which is provisionally accredited by Umalusi to administer the National Senior Certificate examinations. SACAI administered its first National Senior Certificate examinations this year, and its results were also subjected to Umalusi's standardization processes. Another new independent assessment body, Benchmark, which is also in a process of obtaining accreditation from Umalusi, completed a pilot of its first GTC ABET Level 4 examinations in November this year. Benchmark results were also subjected to Umalusi's standardization processes. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you. Please join me in welcoming Umalusi's Chairperson of Council, Professor John Volming, to deliberate on Umalusi's findings and its conclusions regarding the 2014 examinations of the Independent Examinations Board, the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, Benchmark, the Department of Basic Education, and the Department of Higher Education and Training, Over to you, Professor Volman. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Okometi, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I will do my presentation in two parts. I'll make a few introductory remarks now, and thereafter I will ask the chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee, Professor Kurtluk, to explain how we make these decisions, the standardization decisions, and thereafter I will come back and give you the decisions that we've made. The CEO, Dr. Okometi, just pointed out that Umalusi has a specific mandate as outlined in the Gen-FETFA Act. Central to this mandate is the responsibility to assure the quality of the assessments at exit points and to issue certificates to successful candidates. Now, Umalusi recognizes that this is a national responsibility, and we understand that as Umalusi Council we are expected to discharge that responsibility with a great sense of assiduousness. We owe this to the people of South Africa and to the learners whose future is directly affected by the decisions we make. We call this a high-stakes assessment. High-stakes assessment at exit points have far-reaching consequences for learners in any education system. It's therefore necessary that all the checks and balances required to guarantee fairness to all the candidates and to provide confidence are in place. And I can say, without fear of contradiction, that Umalusi has a well-established, rigorous and robust procedures in order to provide assurance to parents, to employers and higher education that all learners receive appropriate recognition for their performance in line with agreed national standards. Now, I have to say this, in the execution of its responsibilities, Umalusi understands that at times it has to make unpopular decisions. At the same time, Umalusi remains self-critical and open to constructive criticism from whatever source. We welcome feedback from the various education stakeholders. We, in our turn, will deepen our commitment as a learning organization to constantly strive to improve our own practices and procedures through research so that we can enhance the quality assurance approaches. In the final analysis, we exist alongside all the other education stakeholders to make a unique contribution to the quality of education in our country. So when we quality assure the work of the various assessment bodies, as you will hear, we compare standards and expectations in the hope that in that way these standards and expectations will themselves be raised on an ongoing basis. It is for this reason that as a Quality Council, Umalusi remains committed to improving education standards throughout the general and further education system. And it includes all levels and grades at school and not only the national senior certificates. As mentioned by the CEO, Umalusi is required to approve the release of the results once it is satisfied that the examinations have been conducted in a fair, valid and credible manner. We have received irregularities reports from the various assessment bodies, and we are pleased that there have been no reports or evidence of leakages of examination papers in any of the examinations. However, having said this, it is worth noting that through our monitoring and moderation processes, and from reports from the Department of Basic Education in particular, we have observed that in some instances new forms of dishonesty have emerged. The public assessment system in particular faces new challenges requiring urgent attention, and I shall comment on this later when dealing with the NSC examination. So we're going to provide each assessment body with a detailed technical report which will highlight the areas of concern and directives for compliance, as the CEO had pointed out. We expect that these reports will be cascaded to the relevant levels and that the concerns highlighted are given the priority they deserve. And Umalusi will monitor progress made in addressing the concerns raised. Allow me now, finally, to briefly explain the significance of the 2014 NSC examination and why it is a special one. You all have heard of the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Statement, the so-called CAPS curriculum. This is a newly phased-in curriculum. It is very similar in content in many subjects as the previous National Curriculum Statement, or NCS. Remember, the exam is NSC, National Senior Certificate. The curriculum is NCS, National Curriculum Statement. Largely it is accepted that the CAPS curriculum has strengthened the NCS. The content is generally specified to a greater extent, with practical and assessment tasks specified, and direction is given to the pace at which the curriculum topics should be taught. So this is aimed at ensuring that the whole curriculum is covered adequately. Now, again, it is public knowledge that the CAPS curriculum was phased in as follows. In 2012, it started with foundation phase and grade 10. Then in 2013, it was the intermediate phase and grade 11. And now, for the first time in 2014, it's a senior phase, which is grade 7, 8, and 9, and grade 12. So the 2014 NSC examination represents the first year in which the new CAPS curriculum is being assessed at the grade 12 level. It had been assessed at other levels, but not at the grade 12. While many subjects have not experienced dramatic content changes from the previous curriculum, a number of subjects have undergone significant changes in content or even shifts in formats. The following subjects have undergone major changes. It's worth noting: mathematics, major change in format and the structure of the question papers as well as content. Physical science, major changes in the depth of the content. Life sciences, major changes in cognitive demand and curriculum. Economics, major changes in format and structure of the question papers. For the first time, there were 2 question papers instead of 1 in economics. Geography, major changes in cognitive demand and in the format of the question papers. And history, major changes in the format and structure of the question papers. Also, agricultural management, agricultural technology, dance studies have all undergone major changes. Now, for that reason, Umalusi was very vigilant in the standardization process to ensure that the 2014 candidates are not unfairly disadvantaged because of the introduction of the CAPS curriculum, the amended curriculum. Other factors that were taken into account, you may recall the language compensation. traditionally stood at 5%. This year, it's reduced to 4%. And next year, it will be reduced to 3%. And then 2% the following year, until it is finally phased out. So, I just want to say that it's important that we pay attention not only to the main subjects or the so-called gateway subjects, but to all the subjects, in order to see learners emerging out of our schooling system who are, quote, literate and numerate and multi-skilled, but who are also creative and confident and resilient and independent, compassionate and environmentally respectful and able to participate in society as critical and active citizens as envisioned in the curriculum statements. It is the case that we now have, in my view, a very beautiful curriculum, one that is internationally benchmarked and is modern and relevant, and it reflects the progressive values of the Constitution. It has a strong focus on Africa and South Africa, and we can hold up this curriculum statement with pride anywhere in the world. My simple hope, however, is that we would soon reach a point when we can hold up our assessment tools and our assessment practices with the same degree of confidence and pride. So in conclusion, I thank the CEO, Dr. Rakumesi, for his excellent leadership, and all the Umalusi senior managers and staff who work tirelessly against very stringent and tight timelines to deliver the best for this country. I would like to thank all members of the Assessment Standards Committee for a job well done. We have a wonderful new Assessment Standards Committee, in my view, a very nice blend of youth and experience. I, however, would be remiss not to publicly acknowledge the important role over the years played by two people, Professor Moon Moodley and Professor Paul Fatty, who over the many years have mentored all of us and guided us to make the best possible decisions. Finally, I would like to thank Professor Kurt Look for his leadership as chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee. And before I discuss the approval decisions and tell you what the decisions are, I now have pleasure in asking Professor Luke to give us the standardization principles and procedures. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and members of the media. All my life I am trying to dodge the media, but today I'm in a catch-22 situation. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to deal with the aspect of standardization. There's an abundance of evidence both in South Africa and elsewhere in the world that despite careful attention and diligence of competent and experienced examiners, moderators and markers, it is impossible to determine whether a question paper is actually of the required standard until it has been written and marked. And this year this has had special significance with the new CAPS curriculum. Any large-scale examination process invariably has many and varied sources of variability. Most of these are unplanned, unintended, and undesirable. Therefore, it is essential to review the raw mark examination marks. These raw results should be adjusted, or what we call generally standardized, if evidence indicates that the question paper did not produce a fair or credible result. To define standardization a little bit more closely, standardization of learner performance is an important quality assurance process used the world over, not unique to South Africa, to mitigate the impact on learner performance caused by factors other than the learner's subjects, the learner's abilities, and the learner's aptitude. To define it more closely, standardization of examination results is the process whereby the results of the examination in a particular year is compared with established or calculated norms and adjusted if necessary. I can just mention that these norms are calculated over a period of 5 years. There are two main objectives of standardization. Firstly, to ensure that a cohort of learners is not advantaged or disadvantaged by factors other than their knowledge and cognitive abilities. And secondly, to achieve comparability and consistency of learner performance across years and across the various subjects within a given year. To put it simplistic, ladies and gentlemen, if you wrote matric 3 years ago and you achieved an A in physical science, and a learner that wrote now achieved an A in physical science, it should mean the same thing. And if you would have written again this year, you would have been in the same position to achieve an A than you would have been 3 years ago. Umalusi's standardization process, ladies and gentlemen, consists of a set of computer programs by which examination raw marks are compared with the norms as calculated and provided by the General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance Council, which is generally known as Umalusi, who we are representing today. If the examination papers of the examinations of 1 year are of the same standard as the previous years, the results should theoretically compare closely with the norms, as I said, as calculated by the quality assurance body. If this is not the case, it is necessary that adjustments will be suggested by way of what we call the standardization process. The suggested adjustment to marks are analysed and evaluated by the Provincial Examinations Assessment Committees, as well as the Assessment Standards Committee of Umalusi. These committees have to decide whether the adjustments suggested by way of the computerized standardization process are acceptable, and if not, what other adjustments, if any, should be effected, and that will be to a maximum of 10% above or below. It is not allowed to exceed that, and the committee will take decisions on various reports. Now, the reports that the committee considers is the examiners and the moderators' reports on the verification of the moderation of internal assessment, the report on the monitoring of the conduct of the examination, reports on the verification of the marking, and lastly then, quality assured by the standardization process itself. The process of standardization is done by considering a number of technical and statistical outcomes. And part of that is to consider what we call the pairs analysis. Pairs analysis is related to the same learners taking each subject that you are comparing. The difference between the raw mark averages per subject and the computer adjustments, together with the relative frequencies of the desired distribution as plotted on a smooth graph, is also considered. Now, the smooth graph just means that during the standardization process, a graph and statistical data are produced separately for each subject. It's actually a visual representation of the marks distribution tables. The graph and the statistical data reflect the outcome of the examination accurately in comparison to the norm. On the strength of all these factors, the following decisions can then be taken by the committees that I mentioned. To accept the recommended adjustments, that is as it is recommended by the computer, or take the raw mark as is, or to consider a block adjustment upwards or downwards, or to adjust the marks by a certain percentage, or adjust between symbol intervals. That's a scaled adjustment. There are 8 principles that guide the standardization process. I will mention only 3 of these as they are of particular importance. Our first preference as a standard assessment committee is to accept raw marks as a fair reflection of learner performance. In general, no adjustment should exceed 10% of the total mark of the paper or the historical average. That is a second important principle. The third one that I want to highlight is that in the case of individual candidates, the adjustment applied should not exceed 50% of the raw marks obtained by the candidate. But put simply, moderation of raw marks of individual candidates should not lead to the doubling or the halving of a candidate's marks. It is important to note that if raw marks are accepted, it is because of the following reasons. A, that the examination has been judged to have been of the appropriate level in consideration with the historical evidence. B, that the learner performance is in line with the average historical learner performance profile of that subject, of a particular subject. In standardization, we work with subjects. We do not work with the complete examination. The third important issue is the conduct and management of the examination in a particular subject has not been compromised. If we are happy with those 3 aspects, then we would accept the raw marks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a duty of the Assessment Standards Committee of Umalusi to ensure that no learner should feel that he or she should be embarrassed or feel embarrassed by the qualification that he or she has obtained. That qualification is deemed valid and credible by the employers and by the higher education institutions. None of these should ever doubt the standard of the certificate. Be reminded that all learners receive on the National Senior Certificate a single certificate that will reflect the outcome of the exam. There is no difference. And therefore our duty is to ensure that the standard is appropriate, that the standard is accepted internationally, and that the standard is also accepted by the employers and the higher education institutions. I think.
Well, you were listening to the chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee from Umalusi, of course, Professor John Volmik there, just taking us, of course, through what is happening, of course, with the Umalusi matric results expected.
The 15th of December, last 2 weeks, the Assessment Standards Committee, many of us were holed up in this room for long hours, every day. I think the only day we got off is Christmas and one more day. But we were here for the entire period, and during that time, the Assessment Standards Committee has been hard at work reviewing and moderating learner performance in the following qualifications. Now, I'd like you to turn to this sheet. You've got the sheet. So, this sheet, I think everybody has been given a copy of. Not yet.
They have copies. I don't have it yet. They'll get this thing later.
Okay, if you have a copy, could you give it now? I would like you to see that there are 5 assessment bodies, 5. And that 3 of them offer the national senior certificates. That's the Department of Basic Education is one. The Independent Examination Board, which is IB, is another. And a new one called SACAI. SACAI stands for South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, as Dr. Rakumesi pointed out, Sakai's constituency are homeschooled and some independent schools. Then we also have Benchmark, which is an assessment body that's in pilot phase that offers a GETC, and the GETC is also offered by the IEB and by the Department of Higher Education and Training. And finally, the Department of Higher Education and Training offers vocational courses called NCV levels 2, 3 and 4, and NATED N1 and N3. I will start with the National Senior Certificates, and then I'll end with the vocational courses. And I'll go through there very quickly, and that's why I asked Professor Luke to explain the principles carefully so that nobody can get the impression that these are samsak or made carelessly. We follow a particular methodology to arrive at these decisions. In addition, in 2011, you may recall, Umalusi Council took an unprecedented decision that all standardization decisions relating to qualifications and part qualifications that equality assures will be made public. The details of the 24 decisions you will find as you leave as part of your information pack. So you will have it. I'm not going to go through each and every decision because you will have it in the written form. So let me turn now to the 2014 results. I will start with the National Senior Certificates administered by the Department of Basic Education. As we all know, this is the largest assessment body, it's the largest examination in this country. In total, 550,127 full-time candidates and 138,533 part-time candidates were enrolled for the NSC examinations set and administered by the DBE, the Department of Basic Education. In arriving at these decisions, Umalusi has taken note of the evidence-based reports on interventions and improvement strategies implemented by both the national department and provincial education authorities, and the positive impact of these on the overall assessment as well as on the teaching and learning. So in summary, and as I said, I'm not going to speak on each and every subject. I'm going to pick out a few. And you would be welcome during question time to ask any questions about any other subject. A total of 58 subjects were presented for standardization. After moderation, raw marks were accepted for 35 subjects. And so this figure represents 60.3% of the subjects. You will recall that Professor Luke had pointed out that our preference always is not to adjust it at all. Our preference is to leave it as raw, unless there's a reason to adjust it. So there are 23 remaining, 35 raw, and of the remaining 23 subjects, moderation with mainly upward shifts towards the average historical learner performance was effected on 13 subjects, that's upwards, and downward shifts was effected on 10 subjects. Subjects with upward shifts are the following: physical science, mathematical literacy, religion studies, hospitality studies, agricultural management practices, agricultural technology, information technology, engineering, graphics and design, business studies, English home language, isiZulu home language, Sepedi home language, Afrikaans first additional language. Those were the 13 subjects which underwent upward shifts. Subjects with downward shifts, mainly downward shifts, are the following: life sciences, mathematics, geography, history, isiNdebele home language, Sesotho home language, Setswana first additional language, Sepedi first additional language, Afrikaans second additional language. And so if you allow me to pick on just a few subjects to explain the performance, the learner performance in just a few key subjects. Let me start with mathematics. Because mathematics is always of interest to everyone. Mathematics had undergone, as I said earlier, major changes in content through the CAPS curriculum. The inclusion of Euclidean geometry and probability, together with increase in statistics and data handling and algebra, meant that the CAPS mathematics curriculum would prove a challenge to the majority of learners. Now you will recall I've just said that this is one subject that was adjusted down. What was shown in the learner performance is that there was a significant increase in the failure rate compared with 2013. However, the learners at the top experienced the mathematics examination as much easier. So there was no adjustment at the bottom end. In other words, we didn't adjust any of the people at the lower end. And the only adjustments we did was a slight downward adjustment at the top end, because those learners experienced it as too easy. I've gone slowly over this one. I'm sure you will come back during question time to ask for further explanation. Now, mathematical literacy. I have to say, this one has caught us all by surprise. Learners performed significantly worse in 2014 in mathematical literacy than in any other previous year. Although there were no changes in the format, in the CAPS curriculum, or in the structure of the examination, there was a shift towards, in the curriculum and in the assessments, there was a shift towards exploring and understanding diverse, authentic contexts. And paper 1 in particular was challenging to the learners. And so an upward adjustment was made at each and every level throughout. So mathematical literacy had undergone an upward adjustment at all levels. Physical sciences. The CAPS curriculum represents a slight change in format and the structure, but a significant increase in the depth, not the scope, the depth of the content in physical science. And the learners performed worse than in 2013 at all the levels, bottom and the top. And so an upward adjustment became necessary. Mainly upward adjustments. No adjustment at the bottom, mainly upward adjustments. Then life sciences, very briefly, the format and structure in this subject was not affected by CAPS. in any significant way. There were, however, fairly major changes in the depth of the content. Yet the learner performance in 2014 was the best in any previous year, the best. Now, we use pairs analysis, and if you're not familiar with pairs analysis, I'll come back to that. Pairs analysis shows clearly that the 2014 examination in life sciences was easiest in the group of subjects taken together. So a downward adjustment was therefore done. And I'll be happy to explain pairs analysis if you have a question about that. That's how we detected that this subject was not set at the right level. Economics. Now you will recall I pointed out that in economics there was a major change in the format and structure of the examination, since it was the first year when 2 papers were written. There was also a major change in the curriculum because 8 new topics have been added in the CAPS curriculum. However, surprisingly, the learner performance, despite those major changes, was only slightly down on the 2013 performance, but not down enough to warrant any adjustment. So for economics, the final decision was it will remain a draw. Economics. History. And then I will do one more subject. In history, there were major changes in the format and the structure, but not in the content. Students were given more flexibility to make choices according to their own strengths. However, the history examination appears to have been too easy at all levels, and a downward adjustment was made at all levels to bring it in line with the historic norm. So history experienced a downward adjustment. Lastly, business studies. Again, one of those, like mathematical literacy, that took us a bit by surprise. Although there were no changes in format and structure in business studies, and only slight changes in the content, the learners really struggled with the 2014 examination in business studies. The post-exam analysis will show that there were too many questions aimed at the top performers, the 80% learners we call them. The performance, therefore, was the worst compared to any other previous year in business studies. And so an upward adjustment was done at all levels. Before I leave the NSC, I need to say Umalusi conducts not only the process of standardization that you've heard about, which is required for national examinations, but also through rigorous procedures assures the quality of the entire examination process. And so I want to talk about irregularities. Gaining the approval of Umalusi Council for the release of the results is determined by the examination's level of compliance with policies, as Dr. Rakometsi has pointed out, and the guidelines issued by both Umalusi and each of the assessment bodies. Before such an approval is granted for the release of the results, Umalusi Council has to satisfy itself that no significant irregularities have occurred to undermine the integrity and the credibility of the examination process. Umalusi requires that each assessment body provide a report on all irregularities, whether they were technical or not. The DBE had done a special investigative audit, and they have given us their report. And that report shows evidence of what sadly can be called group copying in 2 provinces in particular, namely KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape. centres were identified for auditing in KZN. And I can explain how they were identified, largely through the marking, but also through other means. So 74 centres were flagged for further investigation and auditing in KwaZulu-Natal. 39 of those were found to be implicated in cheating. And also in the Eastern Cape, 43 centres. Of the 43 centres, 19 centres were implicated in group copying. This is a new phenomenon, and as a quality assurance body, Umalusi is very concerned about this trend, which first appeared in the senior certificates, the old matric, in May, June this year. Umalusi takes the view that strong action should be taken against those learners and supervisors who have made themselves guilty of these acts of dishonesty. Umalusi will therefore not approve the release of the results of the candidates that wrote the examination in these centres. So they are blocked. I would like to point out, however, that it should be kept in mind that in KwaZulu-Natal we found 39 centres to have been implicated, yet in KwaZulu-Natal there are 1,741 examination centres. So only 2% of those centres were found to have been compromised. Same in the Eastern Cape, 19 centres were implicated out of 924 examination centres in the Eastern Cape. So in the view of Umalusi, this number does not compromise the integrity of the examination as a whole in these provinces or indeed in the country. And so the final declaration and release of the results is as follows. For the NSC administered by the DD, having studied all the evidence at hand and on the management and conduct of the National Senior Certificate administered by the DBE, Umalusi is satisfied that nothing has compromised the integrity or credibility of the examination as a whole. We are satisfied that the examinations were fair and valid and credible. And we commend the DBE for running a successful and credible examinations process, not perfect, but credible. Accordingly, we hereby approve the release of the results of the National Senior Certificate Examination administered by the Department of Basic Education. I will now quickly go through some of the other qualifications. The NSC administered by the IEB, the Independent Examinations Board. I will not go into the same detail. I will only give you the summary. The detail you will have and always have access to it. In total, for the IEB, there were 9,976 full-time and 475 part-time candidates who were enrolled for the NSC examinations. A total of 65 subjects were presented for standardization. And after moderation, raw marks were accepted for 43 out of the 65, which represents 66.15% of the subjects for which raw marks were accepted after moderation. Of the remaining 22 subjects, downward shifts towards the average historical learner performance was effected on 15 subjects and upward shifts on 7 subjects for the IEB. And as in the case of the DBE, Umalusi, given the evidence before it, is happy to approve the release of the results of the NSC administered by the IED on a date to be determined by the IED. I understand that date is tomorrow. Then the third examination assessment body that administers the NSC is a new one called the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute, or SACAI. For SACAI, there were 1,190 candidates this year enrolled for the NSC, and they presented 27 subjects for standardization, and after moderation, raw marks were accepted for 24 out of the 27 subjects, raw marks. And the figure represents 88.8% of the subjects. Of the remaining 3 subjects, moderation with upward shifts towards the average historical norm took place in all 3. And again, Umalusi is happy, given the evidence before it, not only to approve the release of the results of the NSC administered by SACAI, but we would also like to commend SACAI for running a successful and credible examination process as a new assessment body that is provisionally accredited. So the next qualification, very briefly, is the GETC, or the General Education and Training Certificate. From the sheet that we handed out, you will see that that examination is administered by 3 different examination bodies or assessment bodies. And I will start with the Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET. In the case of DHET, the ABET Level 4, for ABET Level 4, 26 learning areas were presented for standardization. Of the 26 learning areas, raw marks were accepted for 11 learning areas. Moderation with some downward shifts towards the average historical learner performance was affected on 6 learning areas, and upward shifts for 10 of the learning areas. We want to say this about the DHET examination for adults, that Umalusi remains concerned with the overall poor performance of candidates in the GETC examination ABET Level 4. However, on the basis of its monitoring and moderation processes and the evidence before it, Umalusi is satisfied that there were no serious irregularities that could undermine the credibility of the examinations, and thus approves the release of the results of the GETC ABET Level 4 administered by the DHET. Then there's the GETC administered by the IED. A total of 2,486 candidates sat for the GETC ABET Level 4 administered by the IED. 8 learning areas were presented for standardization. Only 8 learning areas. And following the moderation process, raw scores were accepted in all 8 learning areas. Like in the other cases, Umalusi hereby approved the release of the results of the GETC ABET Level 4 examinations administered by the IED. Then finally, benchmark. The GETC ABET Level 4 administered by Benchmark. This is also a new assessment body that's still in the pilot phase. They do not have even provisional accreditation, and there were only 58 candidates that were enrolled for the GETC, largely mine workers. And there, because of the disruption in the mine, of course, the enrollment was down. A total of 2 learning areas only were presented for standardization, and they were both, after moderation, raw marks were accepted for both. Umalusi is therefore, like in the other cases, happy to approve the release of the results for the GETC ABET Level 4 administered by the benchmark. The final set of qualifications are the vocational qualifications offered by the Department of Higher Education and Training. That is the National Certificate Vocational, levels 2, 3 and 4, or NCV as we call it, 2, 3 and 4, as well as NATED N1, N2 and N3. So a total of 200 for the NCV, a total of 241 subjects were presented for standardization. 84 at level 2, 81 at level 3, and 76 at level 4. Raw marks of the 241 subjects, raw marks were accepted for 125 of these subjects, which represents 52% of the total number of subjects. There were downward shifts in 78 of the subjects and upward shifts in 30 of those subjects for the NCV levels 2, 3 and 4. What we want to point out in passing is that the percentage of raw marks accepted indicates a stabilizing qualification, but also attests to the growing accuracy of the Umalusi standardization process over the past few years. Then finally there's NATED, and we do have some problems here. A total of 86 subjects were presented for standardization. Of those, raw marks were accepted for 46 subjects, with only minor moderation adjustments being approved for the remaining 27 subjects. Umalusi Council, I want to point out here carefully, has studied the results of the November 2014 NATED and NCV examinations submitted by the DHEADs, and has provisionally approved the release of the results for NATED N1, N2 and N3, as well as for NCV levels 2, 3 and 4. Based on the evidence before it, however, Umalusi is of the opinion that the examinations were conducted overall in a credible manner. However, the release of the results is approved with the following proviso: that Umalusi verifies and confirms the accuracy of the resulting data prior to the DHEAD releasing the results. Secondly, the results of the following NATED subjects under investigation for alleged irregularities are hereby blocked pending the outcome of the investigation. And they are Electrical Trade Theory N3, Fitting and Machining Theory N1, Plant Operation Theory N1. The results of those three subjects are blocked. A full report on the investigation must be submitted to Umalusi before the results of these subjects can be standardized. The results of the following NATED subjects that could not be standardized due to less than 80% capture rates must be made available to Umalusi for standardization and approval as soon as possible. We cannot standardize unless 80% of the data are with us. The following subjects did not meet that criteria: Plant Operation Theory N3, Pattern Makers Theory N2, Refrigeration Trade Theory N2. Ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the end of the presentation on the release of the November 2014 examination results. Sufficient for me to add, the Umalusi Council is pleased that the system is stabilizing well and has reached a significant level of maturity, as evidenced by the high percentage of subjects whose raw scores were accepted after the moderation process. However, we must spare no effort in ensuring that we strengthen our education system from the bottom up and continue to strive for excellence in teaching and learning at all levels, because We cannot depend on the standardization process to bring about improvement in the classroom. On behalf of the Umalusi Council, I wish to extend our hearty congratulations to all learners who have done well in the examinations. Warm congratulations all to their teachers, to their parents, their guardians, and all those who have supported these learners in their studies. But to those who have not succeeded, there is another chance for you next year. So work hard and do well next year. I wish you all the best for 2015. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and thank you, Professor Volmik. And now it is time for us to take questions. I open the floor for the first round of questions. Noted you, man, noted you, Faith. If there is not noted you, in that order.
It's Sidima Dia from Power FM. Just a very quick question about the new phenomenon that's emerged. You know, you speak about group copying. I'm assuming that is the phenomenon. I just wanted you to elaborate a little bit more on it. You know, we're already getting questions from followers when saying, you know, they've reported that there was group copying. Just elaborate a little bit on how it worked. What else you found out about it? Thanks.
Thank you, Faith.
Professor Coleman, just for you, I just want you to clarify the math adjustment, because I'm starting to understand what exactly that means when you say that at the top it was adjusted and that learners at the top found it too easy. I don't understand what too easy means in a country where learners are struggling with math and where they are performing very poorly.
Okay. Same question. Okay. Paramita?
My question was along the group copying or the adjustments. What other measures are there in place that Umalusi can take, or what other action can Umalusi take now that you know that there were certain centers, as mentioned, in Pretoria and in Eastern Cape? Are there any other measures that you as an organization can take to ensure that this situation is clamped down on? If I recall, a few months ago there was a report about we have tweaked the security of the exams. I think there's a pilot project in place. It's a business article. Anyway, what I want to know from you is how do we make sure that this phenomenon, as we spoke about, group copying, what are you going to do to ensure, number one, the actions that can be taken against those situations, and number two, that in the following exams, it's something that we are competing when it comes to that.
Okay, now I'll give over to the panel to respond.
So there were two questions about group copying. And then the mathematics. The first thing I want to say is, I'd like to repeat that a few years ago, almost every year, we had reports of leakages of examination papers. That phenomenon has now disappeared. And we can say with a great deal of confidence that there were no leakages of examination papers. So when we're talking about group copying, it's not because the examination paper was leaked, but because there was collusion between learners and more capable peers or supervisors. These widespread acts of dishonesty focused at a few centers can only happen with the approval of those that are responsible for the good conduct of the examination. You ask, how can it be stamped out? It was new in June and May. And Umalusi, this is for the senior certificate, not the NSC. In one province, there were over 350 examination centers. We blocked the results in 153 of those centers, blocked. And the results were declared null and void. So now it's reappearing again. We're blocking it again. This time, it's serious. This is a national senior certificate. There are many, many candidates that are that's set for the examination. And therefore, we know that the learners who have participated in this dishonesty must pay the price, but they're not the only ones that should pay the price. Surely, the supervisors, the chief invigilators, if necessary the principal, who is responsible for the conduct of the examination, should face disciplinary action and sanction, and if necessary criminal charge. It is that serious. It's the only way that we can stamp it out. Otherwise, we will sit with the same phenomenon next year. We have learned that if you take strong action, as in the case of leakages, where people were prosecuted criminally, that after a while it disappears. That's the best offer. I don't know if anybody else in the panel would like to add to it.
Could I just add that how these problems are detected is at the marking center when the markers mark. And the students are providing the same answers, the same right answers, the same wrong answers verbatim. And that it is clear that there's sharing of notes. It is clear that there is dictation, because with learners who write slowly, they lag behind in some areas. And in one classical example, after the dictation has been made by whoever was making that dictation, at the end of his statement, he says to the learners, go ahead. Learners, being what they are, they write, go ahead also. They write, kubegani. You know, that's a classical example that there was somebody dictating to the learners. And like Professor Volming has indicated, the learners may want to get crib notes, they may want to cheat, but the teachers, the supervisors, the principals have to stop them. It is their duty. Where it happens, it means that the supervisors have allowed it, and this situation cannot be tolerated. We've got a commitment from the department that by the end of March, this investigation will be completed and drastic measures are going to be taken to deal with this matter once and for all.
Thank you. So in the two provinces, now the sad situation, the 39 plus 19 centres, the results of all the learners have been blocked. And that to me is most regrettable and unfortunate. Can I now move to mathematics, Coach? Yeah, it's okay. Let me first explain that we use, in making those decisions, 5-year averages. That's one of the things that we use. I also mentioned pairs analysis and stuff, but we use 5-year averages. Now, if you look at, you ask me how can something be more difficult at the bottom and easier at the top? If you look over the past 5 years, right at the top, in terms of distinctions, for distinctions, there was an average of about 1.8%, just under 2%. People had distinctions. And this year on the raw score, there were 2.74%. So you can see that there was a significant increase in the number of distinctions at the top. And our graphs show it. At the bottom, the historic failure rates. Well, let's take last year's failure rate. Was 44.11. 44.11 was the raw score last year this time. This year, the failures gone out to 52.88. So there were higher failures, but there were also more distinctions. You understand what I'm saying? And so therefore we have to adjust the top down, and we leave the bottom untouched. Don't have to do anything. It is not out of line with the 5-year average.
So can I ask a follow-up?
Yes.
I mean, you've been very vocal over the years about the children's performance in
Yes.
maths, right?
Yes.
So if it's really not improving, what does that then say, in your opinion, about the way they are being taught?
Yes, I think that really is the crux of the matter. We're sitting with a mean and median that has been dropping for the last 2 years. Now, we understand this year was different. Actually, to be quite frank, we thought the results would be much worse than what it actually was, because large sections of the mathematics curriculum in 2014 were not there last year. Geometry, 50 marks, 55 marks, and probability. These are hard, mathematically hard topics. Yet, the results were marginally down. So maybe there was much more emphasis on teaching. Otherwise, we would have had a disaster. It's hard to make a final judgment based on that evidence. But I'm saying unless there was very clear interventions in mathematics, we would probably have seen much worse results than what we had.
Okay, I will now open up the floor for the second round of questions. Anybody? It looks like
Please forgive me because the whole it does sound like you are answering this question again, but I just want to make sure I understand what you mean when you talk about adjustment. When you are adjusting a result, it does not necessarily mean are you improving the overall average? Are you? I don't know if you understand what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah. You know, that's why if I say to you, we've done a computer adjustment, then it doesn't tell you what we've done. When the computer suggests an adjustment, we could accept that, or we could apply our own mind and make, as in this case, we decided what to do. We did not take the computer adjustment. We actually softened it. So we did not penalize the learners that were already studying, which the computer did. If we had accepted the computer adjustment, there would have been an increase in the failure. So the Assessment Standards Committee, after a long while, said we will not touch the bottom. But at the top, it's out of kilter with the past 5 years, so we will adjust it. Slightly down. And slightly, there was about 2%, so at most. At the top.
Okay, I believe we are done with the questions. I will now give over to Professor Bonafula Mapesela to give a vote of thanks. But before I do so, I just want to indicate that on your way out, you will get a full media statement, a copy of the media statement, and later today, it will be made available on our website as well. And then another thing is that we do have some refreshments for you, so please don't be in a hurry to leave. Thank you. Prof?
Ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of our media briefing, and it is a pleasure for me to extend our sincere gratitude to all of you who are present here for this 2014 examinations media briefing. This day marks not only the end of a tedious journey, but an important milestone for Umalusi and the different assessment bodies as we finally deliver on their promise to their stakeholders, the learners and their parents. Let me thank in particular the following people. Firstly, I would like to thank all members of the Assessment Standards Committee for the dedicated manner in which they discharge their duties. They've done a very good job. We have a wonderful new committee with a healthy mixture of youth and experience. I also extend a word of gratitude to the chairperson of council, Professor Volman, for providing visionary leadership and for steering this process to this end. A special word of thanks to Professor Luke for his leadership in his capacity as the chairperson of the Assessment Standards Committee. It has been a very busy 2 weeks for all the members involved. Thank you. I thank the CEO, Dr. Rakumen, for his leadership, as well as all the Umalusi senior managers and staff who worked tirelessly and who worked against stringent timelines. I also extend a word of appreciation to members of council, Mr. Brian Shuden and Professor Dan Kwadi, and all representatives of assessment bodies who are present here today, for making sure that we all could deliver on our various mandates. A word of appreciation to the ladies and gentlemen of the media for their willingness to cover this approval of the release of the 2014 examination results and for the cordial manner in which this briefing progressed. In conclusion, let me wish all of you a pleasant and successful 2015 and a safe journey as you travel back to your respective destinations. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The media briefing is adjourned. Thank you.
Hi, Faith. How are you?
Keep the mic. Just need to.
I'm not sure. I think so. When I hear with you. I think
They need another crossing for 1 o'clock. Yeah.
what time is it?